Hello.
Hey.
I just sit here watching.
Café Zola. Zola.
Okay.
Zola. Hey.
So you snuck out of your house and come on down here to the cafe, huh?
Well, you know, at least I brushed my teeth before I came.
Well, you're always welcome, no matter how you come.
Yes. Well, it was important that I come here this evening because this evening is the last evening I'll be here reading these columns from the African Times. I feel a little sad about it because it's been quite an undertaking, you know, to try to re-involve yourself in something that you've done some time ago, but also to involve other people in it who've never been in it before. You know, like somebody says 1996, 1998, what's that stuff got to do with today? Well, hopefully the readings have shown that it has a lot to do with today. And sometimes, I'd like to say it this way, sometimes if we're not careful, history will repeat itself, or sometimes if we're not careful, we'll get a completely different swamp with new creatures in it. Still the same old alligators, but they're called new creatures. I was just thinking of Herman Cain. I mean,
Moving right along.
So, without further ado, let us start with the last two columns that I'll be reading this year, 2019. I call the column the African Times newspaper. I want to press that point with my dear publisher, Mrs. Charles Anyiam, who never bothered me.
Never bothered.
Who never asked me to change anything or to do anything other than what I was doing, and I have to say thank you for that. Because if you had bugged me for one bit, I would have quit.
All right.
So maybe that was one of our points of agreement, that he knew, that I knew, that I would quit if he bugged me.
Artistic talents.
Okay, this one is called Journalistic Apartheid. Journalistic Apartheid. I first began to take serious notice of journalistic apartheid, specifically print, during the gruesome apartheid regime in pre-ANC South Africa. 99% of what we read about what was going on in that tortured place was written, supplied by a small collection of nice-minded white boys. Nice-minded, I'm making that point. So far as I know, there were no stories published in any major league newspaper that glorified the horrors of apartheid. The basic problem of always getting Mr. Kraft's spin on the game was that it was always Mr. Kraft's spin. Mr. Kraft is the name of one of the correspondents who used to do pieces about South Africa. His articles were casually reasonable, usually reasonable, liberal and correct, but lacked passion. It was a bit like reading a prosy stock market report. Mr. Kraft, as an example, told us what the market did, was doing, and might do, but there was no personal fire in his guts. And that's what many of us desperately wanted to relate to, that struggle, passion. No one would want to suggest that he didn't do a good job. The problem stemmed from his outside looking at the inside perspective. Of course, the point can be easily made that an African-American reporter would have viewed matters from a similar perspective. Perhaps that might be true, but I don't think so. Not unless we were saddled with a journalistic facet of Clarence Thomas or Ward Boy Connerly. It's all moot at this stage of the game, in any case, but I would still like to go out on a limb and cop a plea for the blood. What would the African-American spin? What would be the African-American spin? was certainly an African American writer with a modicum of what the black experience in America was like during the Euro-American apartheid era, would certainly have offered sentiments that no white writer could ever serve up. The same deal might hold true for a Chinese American writer, an Italian American writer, a French American writer, whatever. This is not to suggest that talented people shouldn't write about whatever they want to write about, or be restricted to only writing about stuff within their racial circle. Harking back to the old apartheid again, how often we yearn to read a face on the dry account of how an ANC militant was forced to swallow his pride in order to survive to fight another day. Many of the details coming to light under the glare of Bishop Tutu's Reconciliation Committee should have been revealed back then. They were common knowledge. Under the mantle of the journalistic apartheid, the writer didn't want to offend the sensitivities of those who was cautioning for benign neglect. Fast forwarding to now, I suspect that protected coloration, hair trigger writing style, an enormous gust would tell us much more about what is happening in Nigeria, the Congo under Kabila, Gabon, Tunisia, Australia, and a few other places where African blood is an important but untranslatable issue. And while we're about it, why not pull up a few African American restaurant reviewers? Some of us just love Northern Italian, Thai, Greek, Ethiopian food. And of this vital necessity, a collection of television movie reviewers. Much as we all love Howard Rosenberg, it would still be a boot for many young and not so young moviegoers to read a review that came from someone who shared their psychosocial frame of reference. And while we're at it, let's chuck in a whole bunch of music review dudes. I don't think I've ever read a review of a classical performance, and very, very few reviews by an African American of our own basic classical music that was nicknamed jazz. No doubts in anybody's head by this time, journalistic apartheid should be declared dead. How long should we have to use the dumb pass? The translated from Afrikaner is dumb pass. As events in Africa, specifically Nigeria, develop, we should be thinking of a more diverse, balanced view of the situations that will be developing there. It is not a job that should be limited to the usual suspects. Memba.
Memba. Mm-hmm.
Journalistic apartheid.
And that article was written when?
What year was it?
Yeah, what year was that written?
Oh, 1989. Oh, I'm sorry, 1999.
1999. Mm-hmm.
And it's still that way.
Yes.
And I don't think there's a, let's take jazz, for example. I cannot think of any African-American music reviewer, mm-hmm. jazz music reviewer, mm-hmm. of any stature whatsoever. Mm. Unless you went to Blue Note magazine, which is almost extinct. I very seldom see it these days. Mm-hmm. But at one point, the music reviewer, Leonard Feather, for example, who was a transported Englishman, mm-hmm. wrote about jazz, about people in jazz, about the music, you know, and he did a good job. Mm-hmm. But I was always thinking, I'd like to see a black Charlotte Parker of the jazz writing, jazz review writing. Mm. And of course, the thing about restaurants is that I've never picked up the LA Times or any other urban newspaper here in California that featured a review of a restaurant by an African American writer. You know, I mean, we go to Thai restaurants, we go to Vietnamese restaurants. Right. Italian, Ethiopian, whatever. For some reason, well, there is a reason. I can remember talking with one of the editors at the LA Weekly some time ago, who sort of stared at me when I suggested I do a review of the Ethiopian restaurants on Fairfax. First of all, he didn't know they were there.
Oh my.
Ethiopian restaurants.
This
Really? Yeah, really?
Some really good food.
And anyway, I think if I had done the review, if he had allowed me to do it in the newspaper, the column would have been bordered by some big black thing saying.
Well, yeah, you know, you look at African.
This column was written by an African American writer named Odie. Oh, okay. Now I'm going to end this with something I think would be. Well, actually, I have two pieces to end it with.
Oh, that's great.
The first piece is very short. It's called Two Faces of Cultural Imperialism.
Before you jump into that, I just think it's interesting that the media has African Americans eating fried chicken and watermelon and blah, 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 like we don't eat other food.
Barbecue and fried chicken.
Yeah, you know.
Barbecue and fried chicken.
Okay,
Barbecue
right.
and fried chicken.
Okay.
Barbecue and fried chicken.
Yeah.
And you know,
chitlins,
nothing wrong with barbecue and
greens.
fried chicken if that's what you like. But there are different kinds of fried chicken. There are different kinds of barbecue.
And African Americans eat more than soul food restaurants.
You got it. You got it. I mean, what? You know, I hate for soul food to always be condemned to be barbecue and fried chicken.
I know.
With what is it? Mac and cheese. Mac and cheese. Mac and cheese. I hate mac and cheese. I mean, mac and cheese is so bad. Ooh.
Yeah, should try more goat. Should try more goat.
You know, I mean, don't let me get started. Let me get started. Two Faces of Cultural Imperialism. Two interlocked cultural developments were the catalyst for this article. An argument with my Ghanaian fiancé and a fascistic attempt by the California Barbering and Cosmology Program, formerly the California State Licensing Board of Barbering and Cosmetology, to shut down a hard-working young sister's braiding operations, Miss Sabrina Reese. Why? Because the usual suspects couldn't figure out a way to make money from an art that African women have been doing since they first grew hair. Braiding. But first, my argument with Afua. Afua, why must you have your hair starched in iron? Your hair looks and smells so much better when you wear it natural and braids. Odie, you just don't understand. That's so bush. Only small gals wear their hair in that fashion. My friends would laugh at me if I didn't have my hair done. And so, the love of my life, the victim of the ultimate cultural imperialism, is off to have her lovely hair fried. But at least, I must say, she's not as culturally warped as her 24-year-old girlfriends, Anyiam and Akuzwa. They have been bleaching their faces for a couple of years. I thought they had vertigo or something when I first met them. Both have beige-tinted faces and cocoa-colored necks and bodies. In Ghana, they call them Fanta Coke girls because their faces resemble orange mineral and the rest of them are Coke dark. Ghana and other countries on the West Coast, I hear, seems to be filling up with bleaching creams, chemical hair straighteners, self-hatred stuff that many African American women wean themselves from way back in the 60s. Ironically, my darling Afua is fighting me to become a chocolate-skinned imitation of an Obluni. While Sister Sabrina Reese, owner of 2 braiding salons, is fighting the cultural imperialist Gestapo agency to preserve African American tradition. Wonderful example of what can happen when the historical billboard screams loud enough. They're screaming cigarette sales, 5 cents per nail in Accra these days, and people are smoking more because they think it is sophisticated, and cool cultural imperialism. And finally, I think this is sort of ironic and interesting that I would wind up reading this last article called The Africanists. The Africanists. Whenever a major league event happens in Africa, an eclectic collection of friends will get together to discuss it, worry about it a bit, try to determine what effect it will have on our African American lives. We actually do this. Some folks in our community label us Africanists with a scent of a condescending tone implied. We do not reject that label, Africanists, but prefer to be called concerned African American citizens, or if you prefer acronyms, CAAC. CAAC. The minute we received the news and had the full impact hit us, 6 of us on this occasion, we spread out to find out how our community felt about the terrible bombing in Nairobi, Kenya, and Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. The following remark, accurately quoted, came to the reviewer straight up. Fade in. Interior Food for Less Market, Compton, Day. A decidedly overweight woman wearing a casually wrapped turban and flip-flops trailed a trio of types that Robin Harris would have called Bebe's children. Push a cart well loaded with ding-a-dongs, 5-pound bags of sugar, powdered donuts, quart bottles of barbecue sauce, several packs of ham hocks, 2-liter containers of Jazz It Up, 2 loaves of generic white bread, 10 packets of processed cheese and bologna, plus dozens of other health-killing startup delicacies. Sister Lady, it breaks my heart to read about or see what was happening over there. What be happening over there? It's our own people. We can't stop killing each other. It's a sin and a shame. I'm telling you the truth. Put that back, Chakakila. I'm not gonna buy you no yogurt. We already got it. We already got ice cream at home. Didn't those brothers and sisters just finish fighting a war? Now this. Yeah, it's a sin and a shame. Fade 2. Yeah, I saw it on television that my home is bad. You know what I'm saying? But hey, like, they got their problems, we got ours. You know what I'm saying? I think the essence of the thing was summed up by the young Kenyan holding up a hand-lettered sign that said, "Fight Americans in America. Indiscriminate terrorism to get whatever they think they want is so brutal and mean-spirited that it completely turns me off." After seeing all those suffering African faces, how many were killed? 300, 400, and thousands wounded. Do you think any conscious African American could possibly support the agenda of those who did it? I don't think so. We don't dig ISIS. I cried. Thousands of human beings, Africans, are starving to death in the Sudan, the beneficiaries of another insane fratricidal war. The Congo is biting itself again. Who will replace Kabila? As Nigeria lumbers along in defiance of all known logic to what will eventually be a solution to few of its problems, we pray. We, the Africanists, pray for a number of attainable things. We pray that Africa will be the first continent on the planet to declare war to be illegal, to legislate the idea of war out of existence. Wow. The motivation is the absolute insanity of trying to solve human problems by inhumane methods. Never worked and never will work. We pray that the Pan-African world will establish the social, economic, psychological, and political bonds that will offer a better quality of life for all of the planet's citizens. We pray that we will see a United States of Africa in the coming century, a giant beacon for health, wealth, and democracy. We pray that the United States of Africa will grant dual citizenship to all of its children who were pirated away by the Holocaust that was responsible for the African diaspora. We believe that the motherland will never know real peace until all of her children are allowed their rightful place in her embrace, aside from the fact that many of us have excellent technical skills and so forth. We pray to see a completely truthful history of the role Africa has played and is playing on the world stage. We pray to see that various economic systems in Africa decolonized, freed of the neo-colonialization that allows surrogate wars, physical, political, and economic, to be fought there. Cigarettes are going for a nickel per nail in Accra these days. Well, stop them from breathing nicotine here and push it overseas. We pray for a grocery list of essential things, and then we stand up and start fighting for them. Mimba. Mimba, I'm coming.
Yes.
Meaning, at some point in the future, I'll be back.
Well, the orchid, the elephant jade, I, and your other listeners here in Café Zola will miss you and look forward to your return. All right?
I am too. I'm looking forward to it. I really had a kick doing this.
Definitely, we've enjoyed your company and your playing, and you've always been a wee bit different.
Hey.
Okay, your website, though, is www.odiehawkins.com.
Oh, that's right.
It's in the process of being updated. And your books can be purchased on iUniverse, Author House, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, BookBaby, Archway Publishing. And one can just Google your name, Odie Hawkins, and see your immense accomplishments so far and into the future.
You make me feel humble. I mean, I didn't know I was so many Odies.
You are so many Odies. Just YouTube. YouTube search Odie Hawkins. All right.
I won't be known for my bongo playing. I'm still practicing, but I'm getting there.
But if one wants an instrument, one should pick it up and live your dream.
Hey.
Okay.
Ooh.
Ashe.
Ashe, indeed.